My name is Lymer. Thank you for welcoming me online from Hobart. Hello from Belgium. It's actually 20 to 7 here in the morning. The sun has not risen yet, but I'm already here, bright and breezy, to present you this EU-PolarNet White Paper with recommendations for strengthening international polar observations. That's a paper I've led and published last year as part of my work at the Royal Belgian Institute of Natural Sciences here in Belgium. And the Institute was part of this EU-funded program. And basically, that paper that I will introduce throughout that talk brings concrete solutions to key issues. We all know that the polar regions warm up at unprecedented rates. We are facing climate change and environmental degradation. And so there is a need to preserve polar life and societies. And here I would like to quote a report from the Sami, the only indigenous people living in Europe. I'm quoting the report: the weather has become much more unpredictable and extreme. It can be minus 20 degrees Celsius 1 week in January, and 4 days later, it can be 0 degrees and raining. So even the experts of Arctic climate don't recognize their environment. And that's the case for many communities living in these regions. So there is a urgent need to close gaps in observation strategies and to better support decision-making processes if we want not only to mitigate the effects of climate change, if we still want to do that, but also to adapt to these changes. And initiatives to observe polar regions do exist. Of course, we have identified more than 100 initiatives in the white paper. That's data committees, intergovernmental organizations, organizations of Arctic indigenous people, agencies and organizations with interest for climate, and so on. So already for that, this white paper constitutes a catalog of existing initiatives, and we provide links and references. So it's a good state of the art of everything existing for observation of polar regions. But our work has shown as well that there are prospects for improvement in observation of polar regions, and particularly that polar observations are currently sparse, with observing networks fragmented and lacking large-scale coordination. It's a little bit like if polar observation was broken up with gaps, duplications, and overlaps as in a fragmented system, and we are claiming for a defragmentation to optimize that system. And prospects exist in different aspects. Prospects for improvement exist in different aspects of observation of polar regions. There are prospects for improvement in climate system understanding, for improvement in prioritization in observation and research, for international collaboration, for inclusivity, and for data harmonization and standardization. And of course, all of that will cost some money. It requires long-term funding, but the good news is that the projected economic returns from these investments are projected to be to overcome much more the money we put into that. So I invite you to check the literature for that. So basically, those are the reasons why we came up with this EU-PolarNet white paper with recommendations to accelerate the development of a sustained and fully integrated polar observing system. And I would like to invite you to pick up your smartphones, to turn on your cameras. If you scan this QR code, it will lead you directly to the web page where the white paper is stored. It provides concrete, actionable recommendations for strengthening collaboration among international scientific stakeholder and rights holder communities, to advance polar observations and support optimally advised, sustainable decision-making processes. And the methodology for formulating these recommendations has really been a collective process. We've been organizing consultations, workshops, direct meetings. We've called for reviewers, and Chantel was actually one of our external reviewers. So thank you again, Chantel, for that. We've been calling for stakeholders and experts in science, for experts in data, funding, international relations, policy, and dialogue with indigenous people. We've, of course, taken into account the rich literature resulting from all the programs before EU-PolarNet, deliverables from that program, but also existing Polar initiatives from the Council of Indigenous People and so on. And we've been participating throughout 2023 and 2024 across different targeted polar events to collect even more information that we've then been turning into adapted policy-level actionable recommendations. That process took more than a year, and it gathered around 100 persons to try to really fit the recommendation as much as possible to the needs of the different polar communities. And with all these informations, we obtain more than 80 actionable policy-level recommendations within 7 pillars that cover inclusivity, sustainability, and respect, data harmonization and standardization, sharing observing infrastructures, funding and societal benefits, coordination of existing initiatives, long-term research and exploration, and societal relevance, education, and diplomacy. And because that work was mandated by the EU, we provide recommendations to enhance the role of the EU in polar observation and research. But basically, that white paper really is made for everyone, policy and decision makers, funding agencies, academia, NGOs, and others involved in polar research and observation development. That slide here is a bit complex, but it shows you an overview of the 80 policy-level recommendations across the 7 pillars that I just mentioned. You can see these pillars in dark blue on that slide. And we've been working to try to not only formulate the recommendation, make them actionable, but also make them understandable and the easiest possible to implement. So that's why for each pillar, we broke up every pillar in different sub-themes, and we provide the recommendations within these themes. We provide summaries, we provide diagrams, we provide a policy brief that you can access as well with this QR code. All of that to make our work easy to understand and to implement. With all those recommendations, I won't go into the details of these recommendations, but basically you can use the white paper as a menu, and whoever you are, wherever you're based, whatever career stage you're in, you can go and pick up à la carte the recommendations that are the most relevant for you or for your project. So I'll get into the details of only pillar 2 here, the data, to show you basically the organization that I briefly described. You have here different sub-themes for the pillar data, and within all the themes, the recommendations. So for example, if you want to get informed about recommendations for sharing data, you can go and see that we recommend to share the data in relevant catalog, for example, the polar data ecosystem and mapping. For management and alignment of data to include data management activities in funding calls, for prioritization to rely on Arctic data committees, SCAN and the SUS, and so on. And as I said, we provide, of course, references to all these initiatives that we cite in the white paper. I would like also to briefly show you pillar 6 here on international collaboration and research, because in that pillar, we promote Arctic and Antarctic collaboration, and specifically we provide a provisional mapping of Arctic and Antarctic initiatives where we identify and foster collaboration between initiatives with similar mandates in the Arctic and the Antarctic. So not only we provide all this catalog of existing initiatives, but we've been looking at what they do and try to map them according to the areas where they work and if they could potentially work together. As I said, this work was mandated by the EU, so we provide those specific recommendations to EU decision makers, but we've been trying to make that white paper for everyone. So basically, the recommendations can be adapted to all decision makers. And here are some examples: to establish dedicated funding calls for polar and climate-related projects, to strengthen relation with indigenous people and improve their access to polar funding, to develop a national polar policy in collaboration with stakeholders and rights holders, to invest in large-scale international polar infrastructures in the context of the International Polar Years. Of course, they are our future, so to support early career researchers projects, education and outreach, and to create a sustainable presence at both poles through scientific programs hosted by international infrastructures and facilities. So I hope I demonstrated that this paper really can be useful for everyone, and now is the time for the conclusion and the path ahead. That's the implementation of these recommendations. The paper has been published in April 2024, and I've been the pleasure to see that some recommendations are already taken up here in Europe, and that would be a shame otherwise, because all this work, all this energy has been funded by public money. I personally, I absolutely no interest in that work. I mean, my life won't change if you take into account those recommendations or not, except that it might shape a better future for everyone and for the next generations if we don't unite and we don't align between the different initiatives. We may miss important things to adapt to climate change. So please, you have another opportunity here to access the white paper. Please use it, because it's a useful tool to support decision-making processes, to strengthen coordinated, inclusive, and sustainable polar observation. To design, it has been designed with the polar communities, for the polar communities, and it provides actionable, concrete recommendations with examples and supporting diagrams to ease the implementation of the recommendations. So please use it. Start now to initiate a sustainable future of polar science and observation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Gail. Definitely appreciate you taking the time at such a terrible hour to present this to us. And now we'll move on to any questions, if there's any in the room or online. Oh, got one here.
Hi, this is Peter Pulsper. I'm with Carleton University and formerly the chair of the Arctic Data Committee. I really welcome this report and thank you for all the work that's gone into this. I'm wondering if you explicitly address the issue that we all recognize in our countries of when there's observations data being generated from competitive processes, i.e. 3-year, 5-year grants to universities typically, and so on. How do we ensure that those data observations are aligned? How do we motivate that? Because it's a bit different than if you have a federal program under a federal agency. And we've seen this, and I think a lot of the fragmentation is in that sector. So do you explicitly address that in your recommendations?
We do specifically address the need to share and to align the data between each other and to make them fair, to make them findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And that is fundamental for every programs in the future. And I truly recognize what you just said about the difference in the grants and in the projects that have sometimes different purposes. We are facing sometimes issues due to national security things, for example, and nations that don't necessarily want to share all the data. And we've been providing those recommendations in that white paper, indeed, to go toward more aligned data with fair principle and more accessible to everyone. And so we've been trying to address that indeed. Now, I mean, with that white paper, really, we provide a tool to everyone. And it's now in the hand of everyone else to take that into account at different levels, not only at the level of researchers, but also at the level of policy makers and decision makers. And I've been presenting that white paper for a year now. And actually, thank you, because this is the last talk I will do at the international level regarding that white paper, because now it needs to become free to use to everyone and to get into the hand of everyone else. And as I said, at different levels, not only at the levels of researchers, but everyone. And I hope in every countries and every international groups of countries, there will be a motivation indeed to use those recommendations.
Great. Thanks again to you and your team.
Thank you. Any other questions that we have for Gail? No, awesome. Well, maybe you can get some more sleep, but thank you so much again. Last chance for the QR code for everybody here, but it is up online, and I do recommend you to take a look at it, please. Thank you, Gail.
Thank you, Chantal. I just want to say that you scheduled some time at the end of the session for questions, but I will be leaving because I will take my train to go to work now. So please get in touch by email if you want to continue this discussion. And I apologize, I won't be there at the end of the session.
All good. Thank you so much, Gail. Appreciate it. Yeah, thank you.